When we talk about health after 60, we're not just discussing medications or exercise routines. We're talking about how small daily decisions like where we store our food can either protect our bodies or quietly work against them. Most people think refrigeration preserves everything, but that's not always true, especially for older adults. Some foods, when chilled, can undergo chemical changes, lose their nutritional potency, or even trigger health problems we don't see coming. When we think of nutrition in our 60s and beyond, it's not just about what we eat, but also how we store our food. One quiet but important detail is this: some of the most powerful health protective compounds in our foods, especially those found in vegetables, can be damaged or destroyed when we refrigerate them. The cold environment of a fridge isn't neutral. For certain foods, it's actually hostile to their natural chemistry. Let's take tomatoes as an example. They're rich in lycopene, a natural pigment, and antioxidant that has been linked to reduced risk of prostate cancer, heart disease, and even cognitive decline. But when tomatoes are stored in the fridge, their delicate cell walls break down, causing them to become mealy in texture. And more importantly, the cold can significantly reduce their lycopene content. But what was once a vibrant disease-fighting food can lose much of its biological potential. The same is true for garlic. Garlic contains allicin, a sulfur-containing compound that forms when you crush or chop the cloves. Allicin is one of the key reasons garlic has been prized in medicine for centuries. It's been shown to support immune health, lower blood pressure, and even slow the progression of atherosclerosis. But when you put garlic in the refrigerator, that enzyme-driven conversion to allicin can be disrupted. Instead of allowing garlic to develop its full medicinal chemistry, refrigeration halts the process and shortens its health benefits. This matters even more as we age. In our 20s and 30s, we can get away with a little nutritional slack. Our bodies are generally more forgiving, but after 60, the ability to fight inflammation, maintain immune resilience, and repair DNA becomes increasingly reliant on the quality of what we consume. We can't afford to lose the potency of our nutrients, not when they play a role in everything from joint health to blood pressure regulation. And it's not just about antioxidants. Cold can also affect the texture and flavor of foods in ways that make us less likely to enjoy them. And that becomes a health issue too. One of the biggest problems in aging populations is undernutrition, not because food isn't available, but because taste and appetite diminish. If we're storing nutrient-rich foods like tomatoes, avocados, or certain berries in the fridge and they lose their aroma, their flavor, and their natural appeal, we're less likely to eat them consistently. The consequence, we miss out on essential vitamins, minerals, and protective phytochemicals at the very time our bodies need them most. There's also a psychological angle here. Food should bring pleasure. As we age, that connection to food as a sensory experience becomes a kind of medicine in itself. The aroma of a sun-ripened tomato or a freshly cut onion isn't just nostalgia, it's appetite stimulation. When cold temperatures dampen that sensory experience, our enjoyment and therefore our intake drops. So refrigeration doesn't just affect the chemistry of food, it affects the psychology of eating as well. Another subtle but important point is oxidative stress. Many of the compounds we get from fresh produce, like vitamin C, polyphenols, or anthocyanins, act as antioxidants, neutralizing the free radicals that damage our cells over time. But some of these compounds are heat sensitive and cold sensitive. That means improper storage can degrade them before they ever make it into our bloodstream. When that happens, we lose one of our body's key defenses against aging-related diseases like Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, and even certain types of cancer. This isn't to say refrigeration is bad. It's essential for many foods, dairy, meats, leftovers, but the idea that everything stays safer or better in the fridge is a common misconception. The truth is more nuanced. For example, root vegetables like onions and sweet potatoes thrive in cool, dark, dry environments, but not necessarily cold ones. Refrigerating them can actually alter their sugar content and nutrient density. So, what's the takeaway here? Be selective. Store foods in a way that honors their natural design. If a fruit or vegetable grows in warm, sunlit conditions, chances are it wasn't meant for the refrigerator. Instead, store those foods at room temperature, away from direct sunlight, and eat them at their peak ripeness. That's when they're most flavorful and most potent. We don't often think of nutrient loss as something that starts in our kitchens, but it does. And after 60, when every bite counts, these small choices add up. The foods we buy are only as powerful as the way we handle them. Keeping a tomato out of the fridge might seem trivial, but when that tomato contains the antioxidants that lower your blood pressure or support your immune system through the winter, the impact becomes meaningful. In short, protecting the nutrients in your food is a form of self-protection. And sometimes the best way to do that is simply to keep the fridge door closed. As we age, one of the systems that becomes most vulnerable, but often overlooked, is the digestive system. Many people expect joint stiffness or slower metabolism after 60, but they don't always realize that the gut too changes with time. The stomach produces less acid, enzyme production slows, and the lining of the intestines becomes more delicate. All of this means the way we break down and absorb nutrients becomes less efficient. And when digestion falters, it sends ripple effects across the entire body, affecting energy, immunity, even mood and brain function. This is why it's so important to preserve every advantage we have when it comes to supporting digestion. And surprisingly, something as simple as putting the wrong food in the refrigerator can compromise that system in subtle, cumulative ways. Take bananas, for instance. They're often seen as a go-to food for older adults, easy to digest, gentle on the stomach, and full of potassium, which supports healthy blood pressure. But there's something more happening beneath the surface. Bananas, when left at room temperature, continue to ripen. During this natural ripening process, enzymes within the banana are activated. Enzymes that not only help the fruit soften and sweeten, but also help your body digest the banana more easily. Refrigerating bananas interrupts that enzyme activity. Cold temperatures shut down the natural ripening process, making the banana's starch harder to break down. What you end up with is a fruit that looks ripened on the outside, but is less digestible internally. For someone over 60, particularly those who already experience slower digestion, constipation, or irregularity, this can make a meaningful difference. But this goes beyond just bananas. Enzymes are crucial throughout the digestive process, and many raw fruits and vegetables come preloaded with compounds that actually help you digest them. Because natural enzymes are sensitive, not just to heat, but to cold as well. When foods like pineapples, mangoes, or avocados are refrigerated before they fully ripen, their enzyme content can be reduced. That means your gut has to work harder to do the same job, often leading to bloating, discomfort, and less efficient nutrient absorption. It's worth pausing here to think about why digestion becomes more important, not less, with age. About 70% of the immune system is located in the gut. The gut also plays a central role in producing neurotransmitters like serotonin, which affects mood and sleep, and your ability to extract critical nutrients like vitamin B12, magnesium, and iron from food depends heavily on the health and function of your gastrointestinal system. So when digestion slows down or becomes imbalanced, it doesn't just result in gas or indigestion. It can affect everything from how your brain works to how your bones hold up. Refrigerating certain foods can also alter their fiber structure. For example, cold stored fruit like peaches or pears can become mealy. That textural change is more than just a culinary issue. It can also reflect a breakdown in soluble fiber, which is essential for feeding the good bacteria in your gut microbiome. After 60, maintaining microbial diversity in the gut becomes increasingly important. The more diverse your gut bacteria, the more resilient your immune system, the better your inflammation control, and the more stable your metabolism. When the structure of a food's fiber breaks down due to cold exposure, it may not feed the microbiome in the same beneficial way. Let's talk briefly about prebiotics. These are the compounds in certain foods like garlic, onions, and bananas that nourish your gut bacteria. Prebiotics are incredibly sensitive to temperature. In bananas, for example, a key prebiotic compound called fructooligosaccharides helps stimulate the growth of beneficial bacteria like bifidobacteria. But refrigerating an underripe banana can stall or degrade these prebiotic compounds. That means your gut bacteria lose one of their favorite energy sources at a time in life when supporting that inner ecosystem is more important than ever. There's also the issue of motility. As we age, the smooth muscle in our digestive tract can slow down, leading to longer transit times. Foods that are easy to digest and naturally help move things along, like ripe fruits and certain vegetables, can assist the body in maintaining regularity. But again, when those same foods are stored in cold conditions, they can lose water content, change texture, and become more difficult to break down, adding to that feeling of fullness, sluggishness, or even constipation. So while it might seem harmless to store a bunch of fruit in the fridge for convenience or to prevent spoilage, the impact on digestion is more significant than we might expect. And for older adults, where each meal carries more biological weight, those subtle effects accumulate: the enzyme loss, fiber degradation, and reduction in prebiotic activity can quietly chip away at gut health, energy, and overall wellness. Sometimes preserving your health isn't about adding more to your life. It's about protecting what's already there. Keeping that banana on the counter instead of in the fridge might not seem like a revolutionary act, but when that choice supports better digestion, a stronger immune system, and more comfort in your own body, it's absolutely worth it. These small daily decisions build the foundation for how we age, and digestion, though often out of sight, is one of the most powerful systems we can support, starting with the way we treat our food before it ever reaches our plate. One of the most misunderstood aspects of aging is how sensitive the body becomes to changes in blood sugar regulation. After 60, even subtle disruptions in glucose balance can have far-reaching consequences, impacting energy levels, brain function, cardiovascular health, and the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. What most people don't realize is that these disruptions don't always start with sweets or carbs. Sometimes they begin in the kitchen with a well-meaning but misguided storage habit, like refrigerating potatoes. Potatoes are often seen as a staple food, comforting, versatile, and nutrient-rich when prepared well. They contain vitamin C, potassium, fiber, and compounds that support immune and cardiovascular health. But when we refrigerate raw potatoes, something begins to shift inside them. Under cold conditions, the natural starches in potatoes begin converting into what's called resistant starch, a form of carbohydrate that resists digestion in the small intestine. At first glance, this might sound like a good thing. Resistant starch can have positive effects in some cases. It feeds gut bacteria and may help with satiety. But for older adults, the story isn't that simple. When resistant starch is consumed in larger amounts or in the wrong context, like from improperly stored potatoes, it can cause delayed spikes in blood sugar. The body struggles to break it down in the normal rhythm, leading to unpredictable glucose responses. And for anyone managing blood sugar, whether you're pre-diabetic, diabetic, or just aiming to prevent either, these irregularities can quietly undermine your progress. There's also a hidden biochemical shift that happens. Refrigerated potatoes, when later cooked or reheated, undergo a process known as retrogradation. This reorganizes their starch molecules in ways that further reduce digestibility, but also increase fermentation in the colon. For some, that can lead to bloating or discomfort. But more concerning is the way these altered starches interfere with insulin sensitivity. In the aging body, where insulin response is already less efficient than in youth, this added burden can accelerate metabolic imbalances. Maintaining insulin sensitivity is one of the cornerstones of healthy aging. It's not just about avoiding diabetes. Insulin is a hormone that touches nearly every system in the body. When it's working well, insulin helps your cells absorb glucose efficiently, keeps inflammation under control, and supports brain health. But when insulin sensitivity declines, the risk of chronic disease climbs. Heart disease, Alzheimer's, even certain cancers have been linked to insulin resistance. Something as seemingly benign as a refrigerated potato can, over time, contribute to this decline if we're not aware of what's happening behind the scenes. It's important to remember that the way foods behave in the body is heavily influenced by how they're stored and prepared. A fresh, room temperature potato cooked properly and consumed as part of a balanced meal is broken down gradually, providing a steady release of glucose. But that same potato, if stored cold and later fried or roasted, can cause a very different metabolic response. Faster spikes, longer crashes, more strain on the pancreas. And this is especially relevant after 60, when the pancreas itself may be less efficient. The beta cells, which produce insulin, become more vulnerable to oxidative stress and inflammation over time. Asking them to respond to erratic glucose patterns day after day only speeds up their fatigue. By contrast, making small strategic changes in how we treat our food can help preserve pancreatic function and stabilize blood sugar naturally. There's also a broader dietary context to consider. Many people in their 60s and 70s begin to eat more simply smaller meals, fewer ingredients. That can be a good thing for digestion, but it also means that every ingredient plays a bigger role. If one staple, like potatoes, is handled in a way that disrupts glucose balance, it can skew the entire nutritional picture of the day. This is why a food as medicine approach doesn't end at the grocery store. It continues into how we treat food at home, what we refrigerate, what we don't, how we cook and combine ingredients. When we see a potato, we're not just looking at a carbohydrate, we're looking at a plant that can either nourish or challenge our body depending on how we interact with it.
Fortunately, this is easy to change.
Store raw potatoes in a cool, dark pantry, not the fridge. Keep them in a breathable bag or basket, away from onions, which can cause them to sprout faster. And when you prepare them, opt for boiling or baking instead of frying. Combine them with a source of healthy fat, like olive oil, and a source of protein to further reduce the glycemic impact. This isn't about fear, it's about awareness. The goal is not to avoid foods, but to work with them so they support the biology of aging instead of challenging it. Small changes in how we store and prepare our foods, like avoiding the fridge for potatoes, can lead to measurable improvements in how we feel, function, and age. It's a reminder that health isn't built through one grand gesture. It's built through daily decisions, quiet ones, like where you keep a potato. In the world of healthy fats, few ingredients receive more praise than extra virgin olive oil. And for good reason. It's rich in monounsaturated fats, loaded with antioxidants like polyphenols, and has been linked in countless studies to heart health, brain protection, and even longevity. But what many people don't realize is that how we store olive oil can dramatically affect what it does inside our bodies, especially after the age of 60, when our internal defenses aren't as robust as they once were. How we preserve these oils matters just as much as whether we use them at all. One of the most common storage mistakes people make is refrigerating olive oil. On the surface, it may seem logical. Cold slows spoilage, right? But olive oil doesn't belong in the refrigerator. Cold temperatures can cause it to solidify and turn cloudy, which may not be harmful in itself, but it signals a more important shift, chemical changes that can degrade its protective properties and in some cases lead to the development of compounds that are actually harmful. Olive oil is a natural product, and like all living things, it's subject to oxidation. When it's exposed to air, heat, or light for too long, the fatty acids in the oil begin to break down. This is why high quality olive oil is often sold in dark glass bottles. It helps protect those fragile health promoting compounds from degrading. But refrigeration introduces another challenge. Condensation. When you take refrigerated olive oil out into warmer air, moisture can form inside the bottle. That small amount of water may not seem like a problem, but over time it can promote oxidation and microbial growth, especially if the seal isn't perfectly tight. As the oil oxidizes, it begins to lose the very antioxidants that make it beneficial. Polyphenols, the molecules responsible for olive oil's bitter taste and anti-inflammatory power, are extremely sensitive to environmental changes. Once broken down, they can no longer scavenge free radicals or protect your blood vessels. Instead of reducing inflammation, oxidized oil may quietly contribute to it, further burdening the immune system and creating conditions that favor chronic diseases. This becomes more significant as we get older. The aging body is already more prone to oxidative stress, a state where damaging free radicals outpace the body's ability to neutralize them. It's one of the root mechanisms behind many conditions associated with aging: atherosclerosis, neurodegeneration, macular degeneration, and even certain types of cancer. Every dietary source of antioxidants plays a role in buffering this stress. And when those sources are compromised, the burden on the body increases. There's another concern. Some of the byproducts of oxidized oils, like lipid peroxides and aldehydes, have been shown in laboratory studies to damage cells, alter DNA, and interfere with metabolic function. These aren't always present in harmful levels from casual use, but they accumulate with repeated exposure, especially if an oxidized oil is used for cooking at high temperatures. For older adults who may already be managing high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, or compromised liver function, these compounds can introduce an unnecessary layer of risk. Beyond olive oil, other oils like walnut, flaxseed, or avocado oil are even more fragile. These are rich in polyunsaturated fats, which are highly prone to oxidation. Refrigerating these oils is often recommended to preserve freshness only when the storage conditions are optimal. Airtight containers, no condensation, minimal temperature fluctuation. But when taken in and out of the fridge or exposed to light and air, the protective benefits quickly deteriorate. What was once an anti-inflammatory ally becomes a pro-oxidant trigger. This is why the environment where oils are stored matters. A dark pantry kept consistently cool and dry is ideal. You want to protect these oils not just from heat, but from light, moisture, and air. Tightly sealed bottles, preferably made of dark glass or tin, stored away from the stove or window, will extend the life and preserve the health benefits of the oil inside. And let's not forget about the cumulative impact. If someone is making a salad with olive oil every day or cooking stir fries with avocado oil multiple times a week, the quality of that oil has a compounding effect. It's not just about taste or culinary performance. It's about what that oil is doing to your blood vessels, your cells, and your long-term health trajectory. Fortunately, this is a simple fix. Keep oils out of the refrigerator unless they explicitly require it. And even then, use them quickly once open. Purchase oils in smaller bottles so they don't sit around for months after being opened. And pay attention to expiration dates, especially for oils rich in omega-3s, which go rancid more quickly than others. After 60, every choice becomes more meaningful. The foods we eat and how we store them can either help us maintain vitality or quietly erode it. Olive oil and oils like it should be healing agents in our kitchen. But that healing potential depends on how we protect their chemistry. It's a small act of respect for both the food and the body it serves. When it comes to food safety, we're often taught to trust our eyes and our nose. If something smells fine and looks normal, it must be safe to eat, right? But the reality, especially after the age of 60, is more nuanced. Some of the most harmful changes that happen to food over time aren't detectable at all. They occur at a microscopic level, without an odor, without a color change, and often without any visible mold. And one of the most common culprits here is bread, especially when it's stored in the refrigerator. Many people refrigerate bread with good intentions. The thinking is simple. So you keep it cold, you slow down mold growth. And that's true to a degree. Refrigeration does reduce surface mold growth compared to warm, humid environments, but it also introduces a different, less obvious problem: stalling. The process of bread going stale doesn't just mean it gets hard or dry. It means that the starch molecules in the bread begin to reorganize in a way that makes them less digestible. This process, called starch retrogradation, starts much faster in cold environments than at room temperature. For older adults, this matters because digestibility is already compromised due to changes in digestive enzymes and gut motility. Eating cold stored bread that has chemically changed may not make you sick outright, but it can contribute to bloating, poor nutrient absorption, and fluctuations in blood sugar. And because these symptoms often show up hours after eating or even days later, they're rarely traced back to the bread itself. But there's an even deeper concern. Even when refrigerated, bread is not immune to mold growth. It just grows differently. Mold spores thrive in dark, moist, low airflow environments, like the inside of a plastic bag or a refrigerator drawer. And while you might not see the classic fuzzy green or black spots, certain types of mold can grow invisibly in the core of the loaf, especially in commercial breads that contain preservatives. These molds may not produce a smell, and they may not change the texture in any noticeable way, but they can release mycotoxins, compounds that are harmful to human health, particularly for those with weakened immune systems. After the age of 60, the immune system becomes less efficient at detecting and neutralizing pathogens. That means you're more vulnerable, not only to foodborne bacteria, but also to fungal toxins. For someone with an autoimmune condition, or who's taking medications that suppress immunity, like corticosteroids or chemotherapy, even trace amounts of mold or mycotoxins in food can cause symptoms like headaches, fatigue, intestinal upset, or low-grade inflammation that's hard to trace. The challenge is that these symptoms are non-specific. A person might chalk up the fatigue to age or the brain fog to poor sleep, never realizing that their breakfast toast stored too long in the fridge may be part of the picture. It's a quiet erosion of health that's easy to miss, but very real in its effects. Another point worth considering is the broader microbiome. Your gut bacteria are incredibly responsive to what you feed them. The subtle chemical shifts that happen in stale or mold-prone foods may not cause food poisoning in the traditional sense, but they can alter the microbial balance in your intestines. Over time, this can disrupt digestion, immune signaling, and even mental clarity, because gut health and brain health are intimately connected through what's known as the gut-brain axis. This becomes even more relevant when you consider how common bread is in many diets. For older adults who prefer soft, easy-to-chew foods or rely on toast as a quick meal, bread may be eaten daily. If it's repeatedly coming from a cold environment that's encouraging internal spoilage or chemical degradation, the cumulative effect on health could be more significant than expected. What's the solution? It's simpler than you might think. Instead of refrigerating bread, consider freezing it in small portioned amounts and toasting or warming slices as needed. Freezing halts microbial activity and starch retrogradation, effectively preserving both the safety and the digestibility of the bread. And it avoids the moisture fluctuation problem that refrigerators often create, where condensation can build up inside the packaging and foster mold growth. Additionally, choose whole grain, low additive breads when possible. These varieties may spoil faster without preservatives, but they also contain more fiber and nutrients that benefit your gut and blood sugar stability, especially important after 60, and because you'll be freezing rather than refrigerating, spoilage won't be a concern if you're consuming them within a reasonable time. The key lesson here is that freshness is not always something you can see or smell. It's something you protect with awareness. After 60, it's worth becoming more mindful, not just about what we eat, but how we care for the food that nourishes us. By respecting how foods behave chemically and biologically over time, we gain better control over the subtle factors that influence our health. Small choices like how we store our bread may not seem powerful, but when you make that choice day after day, week after week, it becomes a habit. And over time, habits build the architecture of long-term wellness. One of the quiet shifts that happens in the body after 60 is a change in how the immune and digestive systems respond to food. For much of our lives, we may have been able to eat a wide range of foods without any trouble, but with age, our internal tolerance begins to narrow. Foods we once digested easily can suddenly trigger discomfort, gas, bloating, reflux, or fatigue. Sometimes these responses are mild and dismissed. Other times they point to the development of a food sensitivity. And refrigeration, particularly of certain plant-based foods, can be a hidden factor in this process. Let's take onions as an example. At room temperature, onions are full of complex sulfur compounds, specifically a group known as thiosulfonates. These are responsible for much of onions' sharp aroma, but also for their biological benefits, supporting cardiovascular health, reducing inflammation, and acting as natural antimicrobials. However, when onions are stored in the refrigerator, especially after being cut, their chemical profile begins to change. Cold temperatures can trigger a breakdown of these sulfur compounds into smaller, more volatile molecules. These breakdown products don't just alter flavor, they can also irritate the lining of the stomach or intestines in sensitive individuals. In older adults whose gut lining may be thinner and whose protective mucus barrier may be weaker, this irritation can lead to localized inflammation and the beginnings of what many refer to as food sensitivities. But it doesn't stop with onions. Avocados, for example, contain polyols, a type of sugar alcohol that can be difficult to digest, especially when the digestive enzyme levels naturally decline with age. When avocados are stored in the refrigerator before fully ripening, their cellular structure begins to change. The natural fats stiffen and the sugars can concentrate unevenly, sometimes leading to a texture that's harder to digest and a chemical profile that triggers minor gut reactions, especially for those with underlying irritable bowel tendencies. These reactions aren't allergic in the traditional sense. They don't always involve hives or severe symptoms. They're subtler things like bloating, fullness after eating, brain fog, or a mild increase in joint stiffness. Because the symptoms are vague and delayed, they're rarely traced back to a specific food, let alone the storage method of that food. But the body notices, and over time, these small immune reactions can become chronic, contributing to systemic inflammation. A key driver of many age-related diseases, including heart disease, arthritis, and neurodegenerative disorders. After the age of 60, the immune system tends to become more reactive in some ways and less efficient in others. This is part of what's known as inflammaging, a chronic low-grade inflammation that's now understood as a core mechanism of aging itself. When we eat foods that have changed chemically, often due to cold storage, we may be feeding this process without even knowing it. One of the reasons food sensitivities increase later in life is the progressive thinning of the intestinal barrier. The gut lining is just one cell thick and functions like a smart filter, allowing nutrients through while keeping harmful substances out. But with age and under the influence of chronic stress, medications, and dietary irritants, this lining becomes more permeable. The immune system, now exposed to particles it wouldn't normally see, begins to overreact. That's how sensitivities are born, not because the food is inherently harmful, but because the body no longer recognizes it in its altered form. This is where the way we store food becomes crucial. Refrigeration changes the molecular integrity of certain plant-based foods. It doesn't spoil them outright, but it can alter their proteins, fats, and sugars in ways that make them more visible to an already sensitive immune system. The proteins in fruits like peaches, cherries, or apples, for example, can denature under cold stress, especially if they are later warmed or cooked. These denatured proteins can resemble common allergens at a molecular level. And in a primed immune system, this resemblance can be enough to trigger a reaction. Of course, not everyone develops food sensitivities, but the likelihood increases with age. And if you're already dealing with symptoms like digestive discomfort, fatigue after meals, or unexplained inflammation, your food storage habits may be a hidden factor. The solution isn't to avoid these foods altogether, but rather to handle them in a way that maintains their structural and biochemical integrity. For onions, that means storing them whole and at room temperature in a dry, dark space. Once cut, they should be used quickly and ideally not stored cold for long periods. For avocados, let them ripen fully on the counter before chilling them and avoid using overly soft, bruised, or discolored ones, as these changes may indicate internal breakdown that can aggravate sensitive systems. Just as importantly, be aware of how you feel after eating. Our bodies are wise, especially as we age. They offer quiet feedback if we're willing to listen. If a food that once felt good suddenly leaves you feeling off, trace it back not just to what it was, but how it was handled. Your immune system is constantly communicating with you. Tuning into those signals, especially after 60, can help you reduce inflammation, improve digestion, and maintain resilience in ways that no supplement or medication can fully replicate. In the end, aging well is not about restriction. It's about refinement, making subtle, informed changes in how we interact with our food, starting with where and how we store it, can reduce the hidden burdens on our biology and support the graceful, healthy aging we all deserve.